Right, you're welcome back. Our next focus is Nigeria's rising external reserves. It's risen to $30.56 billion right now, according to data from the central bank. Now, this is the third time the reserves will be hitting the $30 billion mark since President Buhari assumed office in 2015.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the rise coincides with a recent rise in the price of crude, which account for the bulk of the nation's foreign exchange earnings. But the increase is still far off the peak of $64 billion recorded in August 2008.
Now, the last time the reserves crossed the $30 billion mark was in July 2015. Now, the reserves were affected by low crude oil prices across the world, which reduced the availability of foreign exchange and, in turn, put pressure on the naira. Nigeria's external reserve has risen by $4.2 billion since the beginning of the year and by $6.2 billion since October 19th. 2016, when it commenced its upward trend.
Right, Nigeria's external reserves accrue mainly from the proceeds of crude oil production and sales. The country produces approximately 2 million barrels of crude oil per day through a joint venture with some international oil companies, notably Shell, Mobil, and Chevron. Now, out of this, Nigeria sells a predetermined proportion directly, while the joint venture partners sell the rest. Now, the joint venture partners pay petroleum profit tax to the federal government through the Federal Board of Internal Revenue.
All right, now let's look at the categories of revenue from crude oil production and sales. They are direct sales, NNPC, petroleum profit tax, that's oil companies, royalties, penalty for gas flaring, and rentals.
Now, other sources of external reserves in Nigeria include value-added tax, income from investing in foreign reserves, and inward money transfer, and lots more. Now, for the second time since President Buhari assumed office in May 2015, Nigeria's foreign reserves have hit the $30 billion mark.
And the latest figures from the nation's apex bank, that's the Central Bank of Nigeria, show that the reserves have experienced a steady day-on-day increase of between 2.30% and 2.75% since January 5, 2017. I believe our guest is on the line right now. Akiyomi Shade is his name, and we'll be discussing this as quickly as we can before we wrap this morning. Good morning, Akiyomi Shade. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. How are you this beautiful day?
Very well, and we're glad to know that you see it as beautiful. Now, the CBN has not been able to give us reasons for this upward movement in Nigeria's forex reserves, apart from the rise in crude oil prices globally. What are the other factors you think are contributing to this?
Oh, well, I mean, yes. First of all, the increase in world crude oil prices has affected the increase in the national reserves, our foreign reserves. But most people will remember that there were some bonds that the federal government sold late last year and early into this year. And that resulted in an upswing in our foreign reserves. Those two reasons are what I will call the indicating factors. Equally, there is a bit of upswing in our expectations. And when I say expectations, that gives hope to foreign direct investment, which is also affecting productivity, affecting a bit of our economy. So all these three factors are the reasons why the foreign reserve is increasing. And don't forget, our oil production has been consistent, unlike last year when we had the militants and the Niger Delta. So these are factors that have definitely affected it. We are producing consistently. That means our income is consistent, and we are getting higher prices for what we are producing. And don't forget that there's also future purchases that have been ordered because there's calm. But when your buyers know that you might not be able to supply, then obviously what happens is there are no future purchases and you don't have income. Because of all this, there's a bit of calmness, and that is affecting our foreign reserves. Also, how much are we actually spending out of the foreign reserves? for a while, the government was not spending anything. Now, you'll recall my argument that we need to spend our way out of recession. Gradually being proven true.
All right, Akin, let me ask, does the increase in foreign reserve translate to economic prosperity for the ordinary Nigerian?
Well, the thing is, technically, we are almost out of the recession. But don't forget, we've had a long period of no action. That is what I'll call it. No growth, no improvement. What is going to happen is the macro economy will be probably the last to see the effect. It's like you start a production line. When the product starts off as a raw material, the consumer will only hear the machines turning, will not see the product. So essentially, the production line has kick-started again. But it will take a time for it to go through the cycle, go through quality control, all the additives, before the final product is delivered. So, well, my hope is we will be a little bit more resilient, and hopefully sooner than later, in the macro economy, we'll begin to see the effect in the micro economy. I will sound a note of caution, though, that what happens if oil prices come down? What happens if, as the United States is saying, they will start releasing oil? What happens if Saudi Arabia and OPEC says we cannot produce to maximum capacity that we've been allowed to? What is our alternative? And that is my only concern. What about after we've sold all the bonds abroad? What happens? Where does income come in from again? The central bank is pushing a lot of money into the economy, forex, because it has it. Can it sustain it? That is another question. These foreign reserves, we should be using foreign reserves for development, for growth, for infrastructural changes. And that is my concern.
And the IMF continues to insist that Nigeria should float the naira while endorsing the ERGP, the Economic Recovery Growth Plan.
Yes.
But the IMF is insisting if we don't get it right as far as implementation is concerned, we may not be able to achieve any growth or recovery for that matter.
Well, that is quite true, because if as an investor I'm bringing in money at 390 or 410, and you're telling me I can only export it at a lower price, that begins to tell me a lot of things. Unofficially, the naira has been devalued last year, but we need further devaluation. We need further devaluation so that the real terms, and the real value of the currency is actually known. And then the disparity between the parallel market and the CBN, which the CBN is trying to force, will not be necessary. Then the CBN can, and the governor of the central bank can now get involved in actually developing monetary policies. The intervention is not good for the economy. Well, I will give kudos to the central bank that when the the dollar was almost a runaway train, he had to intervene. That was about 4-6 weeks ago. He had to intervene, and that was when he kept pumping in all these stalled monies. But I similarly agree that the naira has to float appropriately.
All right, Akin, well, you have said the naira has to float, but the government of Nigeria doesn't really want the naira to float. There's still some level of protection. Now, what are really the fears from the government side that they're not allowing or freeing the naira to float and find its level amongst other currencies of the world?
Well, the thing is, we've always known our president is very protective of the citizens, that the citizens will suffer more. It's only going to be the bourgeois that will enjoy it. But the citizens are suffering. The common man on the street is suffering. So if the naira floats, we actually know what it is. I mean, we need to err on the side of caution and say, okay, let's do it and see what happens. If it doesn't work, the government has a fiat to say, okay, well, our naira will be this to the dollar, and that's it. Germany did it immediately after the First World War and said, listen, we are just going to exchange a Deutschmark to the dollar 1-to-1. And that was it. Nobody questioned anything. If the government can say it's 305 now, why can't it say tomorrow it's 1-to-1?
All right.
Shade, of course, the budget still has not been passed, and we're approaching the third quarter of the year. I wonder how all of this is going to play out, with Nigeria spending about 2 trillion on debt servicing.
Well, you know my position on the budget is still not been passed. We're in the second quarter of the year. It speaks volumes. It doesn't instill confidence in anybody. That's just the unfortunate fact. That's just the unfortunate fact.
Yes.
All right, Akin, thank you very much for talking to us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
All right.